Hi friends, I'm Shauna. Welcome to the channel and welcome to another video. Today we are facing the other way of how I usually film videos. We actually have really great natural lighting today, so we're here. Today we're going to be answering the question that I think a lot of us have had at some point or another. What makes this a good purchase? How do you decide if something's a good purchase? I've asked myself this question too. When I went on my no-buy in 2020, I didn't trust myself to make a good purchase because I'm in this boat for a reason. I'm on a no-buy because I haven't made good purchases. The whole reason why I'm here. What makes something a good one? We're going to be talking about that question today, hopefully helping you create some criteria to determine what will actually be worth the purchase for you. I'm not going to give you a strict list and say these things are good purchases and these things aren't, because there is some subjectivity to this. I'm also not going to say or not help you create your own shopping criteria because it's personal. While, yeah, it's true that where we are in life, including our budget, will influence what we consider to be a good purchase, we can still create criteria to help us. That's the whole goal of this video, to help you create criteria that will help you determine if something is a good purchase or not. Now, we are just about to enter week 3 of No Buy January, and before we hop into the content, I would love to know how that's going for you. Was week 2 easier than week 1, more difficult? Let us know in the comments. Did you buy anything? I would love to hear all your thoughts, so please leave them down below. So, the timeline of this video, what we're going to be talking about today. The first thing we're going to be talking about is the main reason why I think that we are dissatisfied with how we shop. We'll also talk about the overall dissatisfaction with shopping. We'll then talk about the types of purchasing categories, or how we qualify things that influence what we buy. And then we'll lastly finish with shopping criteria. We'll build that along the way, but that will be our focus at the end. Before we can talk about how to shop better, I think we need to consider why we're dissatisfied with how we currently shop. Think about a handful of purchases. I suggest considering things that were at least a month ago so we can be a little bit more honest after we've had some distance. But if thinking about recent purchases will be more helpful for you, do that. So out of, let's say, your last 8 purchases, which one of those feels like a good purchase to you? Which ones don't? And let's think about why. Here's a recent purchase of mine that I haven't showed anywhere. I bought this in Nova Scotia. I bought it at a used bookstore. It was $7. This felt good because it's a remembrance of my time there. It is used, so I feel good about that. It kind of meets some of my own values. It's also within budget. It also meets some interests of mine. Like, this is directly related to what I do on this channel. It's called Why We Buy, the science of shopping. And I'm very interested to hear what somebody else has to say about this. Another good purchase example are the pillows that I bought. They were direct one-for-one replacement. They were in budget. I made some considerations and did some research behind them before I bought them. I just feel good about that choice because I know that I made the best one that I was capable of making. And I also feel good that my dirty pillow is no longer being slept on. In terms of what doesn't feel like a good purchase to me was my recent grocery store trip. While I bought everything that would be good food, like vegetables and things that I actually needed, I wasn't very cognizant of my budget. So I would say I was over budget by $18. I was okay to go over that extra 8 or 10, but then I went over budget more when it was fully in my wheelhouse to change my recipes in order to meet my financial needs. So I had a budget, but the budget's useless if I don't follow it or I don't alter my choices in order to follow it. So that is something that just doesn't feel great. Nothing to necessarily stress about, but I didn't leave the grocery store feeling amazing. when I had full control of like making an alternative choice. Another thing that didn't feel good recently, or not so recently, a couple months ago at this point, was when I bought some tarot cards at Winners while I used a budget. I wasn't using the ones that I already had. That was the big reason. I bought something that is a functional dupe of something else I already have that I wasn't already using. So some potential reasons why you might feel like something is not a good purchase is because we never use the item, so we feel like we wasted our money. We've decluttered the thing not long after buying it, so also that could feel like a waste of money. We're not sure why we bought something, or we feel that way generally about the things that we own. Like you are holding up something and you're like, well, why did I buy this? I kind of feel that way about the tarot cards. Like there's no good reason. Why, like, I never asked myself, why should I bought this? I just went automatically with the feeling of I want this thing. And so I think impulse spending falls into this as well. We feel like the thing adds to the overall with the number of things that we have. There can be overlap with some of these categories. Like if you bought a new sweater as an example, you might want to declutter it. You might feel like it was a waste of money because you want to declutter it. You can also feel like it adds to the overwhelm because you just bought another sweater when you have 12 other ones. And then lastly, I think a main reason could be we're not happy with how much we're spending. We're spending beyond our means, or we're spending too much on things that we don't value. So an example could be buying high price skincare. Well, you do want skincare, you don't necessarily want a $50 moisturizer. Or, conversely, if you're buying a $20 moisturizer or a $15 moisturizer, but you really value spending more on skincare, there's a disconnect with our values when we're shopping. There's one major commonality for why we feel like we were not making a good choice. It's because we put little effort into the consideration stage. And so it's in the consideration stage where we can tailor the questions that we ask ourselves to the needs that we feel like we really want to meet. And we can talk about those questions later, which is the whole purpose of why I got you to do the exercise. I'm going to ask us to think about some reflection questions here, but when it comes time to making purchases, we don't need to be spending hours on reflection. We can create processes to help streamline our choices and our decision making, and we will get to that later. In terms of where we spend the most time in our purchasing journey, I think it should be in the consideration stage. We often feel dissatisfied or disconnect with our purchasing choices because that is our shortest category, or we don't spend any time considering things. We can spend so much time building things up before we get to the consideration stage and building our cart. I don't really consider building the cart part of the consideration stage because you're adding things to cart and we're not actually yet thinking about the purchase as a whole or asking ourselves any questions. And I also think that a lot of us will conceptualize purchases as individual items, so like an eyeshadow or a mug. And when we consider things individually, or if we're making or replacing an order on, let's say, H&M, we'll consider all the things in that order, but not all the things that we bought last month, or not all the things that we bought previously in this month, or all the things that we want to buy. We think about things kind of in an as come or a first come, first serve basis. We're only thinking about things that are right in front of us. And when we do that, we do ourselves a disservice because we need to consider our more macro level habits and so there, as a baseline, 4 main questions I think we should ask ourselves for just about every purchase, and these questions will fit just about everything. Number 1, can I afford it? Nothing is ever worth the money or a good purchase or feel good if we can't afford it. Number 2, why do I want this item? If we cannot come up with a good reason other than I want it, we're likely not being considered. And it's okay to buy things that you want, And when we ask ourselves, why do I want this item? It will reveal to us when we're lusting after something. Just being able to acknowledge that you want something and you're in a lusty phase can be enough. Like just knowing that you're in there right now can be enough to stop you, even if you want it. Because sometimes when we're in the throes of things, we can't, like we don't stop to think at all. So we're not acknowledging that we're in a lust moment. And that's been one of the most helpful things, is being able to acknowledge, yeah, I'm lusting after something right now. So it's not a good time to buy it. You can buy your wants in the future, but buying it right now when you're in the throes of it is not a good idea. Number 3, what purpose or function does this item have, or does this item serve? And then in addition, is that purpose unique? The second part of the question is very similar to the question of, do I have something that I could use already? And if that's ingrained in your thinking, great. For me personally, when I am already thinking about the purpose or the function, it's just easier for me to think about, and is the function unique? When we think about purpose or function, it can also help us better answer number 2. If we're saying, oh, the function of this, like if we're struggling to find a purpose or a function, it's also probably a lust item. But then asking ourselves, does this have a function or a purpose in my life that is unique? It can also help us identify overlaps and also identify, yeah, this is going to be a good purchase. Number 4, do I have good evidence that would suggest that I would use and enjoy this purchase? I personally find that when I am unwilling to do research on something, even at a basic level, it means it's a lusty purchase and that thing will likely not meet my needs. The main reason why we're interested in what makes a good purchase is because we want to feel that satisfaction. We want to feel that internal, like, warm fuzzies, because like we know we're doing a good job. Often, besides the budget, the thing that makes me feel like, yeah, like secure in my knowledge that this is a good purchase is when I have done research, and I know I've done enough research when I believe that I have good evidence to suggest that this thing would work out for me. One reason why you might feel like there's a disconnect between your purchase and your satisfaction is because we're not categorizing the things that we buy at all or accurately. So there are 5 main categories, in my opinion, of stuff, or categories our stuff fits into: wants, needs, replacements, nice to have, and makes life comfortable. 5 things. The reason why I suggest categorizing these things and figuring out how you categorize these things is because it will allow you to be honest with yourself and also provide you with confirmation that something you're interested in will be a good purchase, because it will help you prioritize. But the prioritizing only works if we're honest about how we classify things. And while I could just leave you with some of the questions that I just mentioned, I don't actually think that would reflect how we buy stuff all of the time. There are some things that we buy in which we would feel comfortable bypassing questions altogether, like if something is a need or a replacement, because that in itself, to us, is self-evident that you should buy it and that it would be a good purchase. Just because you finish something doesn't mean that you should replace your item or that you should replace your item with that thing. And in addition, when it comes to needs, a lot of us can conflate wants and needs. That was absolutely me. I grew up with parents who really made distinction between is it a want or is it a need. That distinction is irrelevant if you classify all your wants, or majority of them, as needs. I lumped so many of my wants into needs because I was so desperate to make that purchase, and I misrepresented or mistook that lust and that desire for a need. When you want something desperately, it could feel like a need, and also it could feel like your happiness depends on that thing. And so if your happiness depends on that thing, then surely in my mind, it was like it's a need. You know, like you need to be happy, or you should be happy, I guess. And then with replacements as well, when something was a replacement, it previously was an excuse to shop, because if something's a replacement, then I don't really need to think about it. And it was a way to shop on autopilot. And early on in my no buy, even before my no buy, I didn't buy replacements responsibly. So I'd be so excited that I could shop, and then I would be replacing something, or I would be buying a replacement that I couldn't actually afford or didn't actually meet my needs. Or I would have other things in the wings, other backups that I could have used but didn't want to. So it's like, oh, it's a replacement. I finished it. I can buy a new one. No. Nice to haves and makes life comfortable were not on my list initially. I just had wants, needs, replacements. But what ended up happening, even like we're talking 2021, what ended up happening was that I would qualify things as either a want or a need that didn't necessarily reflect what the thing was. And it was kind of allowing me to conflate things more. And just having extra categories ultimately helped me when I got to prioritizing. Something would be in the category of makes life comfortable if it makes my life easier, or it answers a frustration or an annoyance. An example that's been on my list has been a spice rack. Do I need a spice rack? No. Do I want it? Sure. But I want it more than, let's say, makeup items that I think are pretty. I want it more because it adds functionality to my kitchen. And I just have spices that are like randomly thrown into a cupboard, and it does me no favors. When it comes to nice to haves, those are wants, but they do feel a little bit different than regular wants. Wants are usually surface level and don't always have a lot of thought that goes into them. Like makeup items, I typically want makeup because I think it's pretty and because I think I would like it. Makeup certainly can be replacements, but when makeup is replacements for me, it's usually some of the more utilitarian items. And so if something feels like it would be nice to have, it gives me a little bit more room to categorize things and help me prioritize in my mind when I go to shop. What I found when I look at my data, my best purchases when they're not needs are replacements and makes life comfortable. So categorizing how you spend might be a little bit tricky to begin with, because you might be really tempted to label everything that you actually want as a need, because it will allow you to buy it. An integral step in making purchases that you ultimately feel more satisfied with, I think, is being honest about how you qualify things. Budgeting has really helped me be more honest, because when I have, let's say, $60 to spend or $200 to spend, it's okay that I qualify something as a nice to have or a want, because I can still buy it. It's just not going to be the top of my list. Qualifying all of my purchases into 5 categories creates an order of operations for me every time I want to go buy something. There are rarely needs on my list because I will usually take care of them straight away, and they are at this point really self-evident. So if there is a need on my list, that goes first, then replacements, then makes life comfortable, then nice to haves, then wants. And even if you don't have a budget, if you create an order of operations for how you shop, it streamlines the whole process. And so by creating a shopping list, in my case, it's the intentional wish list tracker. All right, so here's my intentional purchasing wish list, and step 1 of becoming a more considered shopper, making choices that you are more comfortable with. I think the first step is to create a wish list. It doesn't have to be on Notion. It can be whatever medium that you choose. I normally have it set up for a date, but when it actually comes time to make a purchase, I just have it filtered like this. This is how I would consider my purchases. This is the top, this is the bottom of the funnel. And if I have, let's say, $200 to play with this month or every month to make any purchases that is not a strict basic, even things like lip balm as an example. Well, for me, that is a necessity. I'm not talking about lip gloss. I'm talking about lip balm. It has to come out of a budget somewhere. I could qualify the lip balm as a need because it is for me, but I'm qualifying it as a replacement because it's time dependent. I want to make sure that I buy my lip balm in time before I completely run out of my other one, but not so far in advance, I'm holding on to it for months and then forget about it and then buy a new one. So if I have $200 to play with and I've already purchased one thing this month, I purchased a pillow. So $70 of my budget is already gone, which means I have about $130 to play with for the rest of this month. That would be if I'm not on a no-buy. I wouldn't buy the food containers because I'm going to make a larger IKEA purchase. I also wouldn't buy the scale. Well, it is a 1-for-1 replacement. I don't really care about a scale right now. The lip balm, 100%. So I'll take that to the yes. The Rimmel Stay Matte powder, I did not replace the powder that I broke, and I'm really feeling the constraints of that. So I would say that I'm interested in purchasing that. Out of everything that's left, I really would like to get a spice rack I mentioned this example in the video. So, it's going to be at IKEA, so I can't buy that one right now. I'm in desperate need of some cleaning cloths. So I don't use paper towel, and I do have some actual, not paper towel. I do have some cloths that I would use, like towels, but because I use them every day instead of paper towels and as well to clean, I don't have enough for a week. So this one, while I do have some towels, adding a couple more would make my life easier. So yeah, and I've been thinking about that for a month. The rest of this is IKEA, so it's not for now. The other thing that has been on my mind for more than a month at this point, the first time I put it on was the 26th, but I've been wanting it for longer than that, are these beautiful glasses from Simon's. I cannot get enough of them. I really want these. While it would be nice to have a couple of extra glasses, it would make life comfortable in that sense. A lot of the reason why I want them is not because they make life comfortable, it's because I think that they're beautiful. So we're going to say yes. So we're at $116.46. I'm under budget in this example, and I would honestly use that roughly $80 to roll over to save up for that larger IKEA purchase. That's probably going to be more like $300 or $350. So I would need some extra budget from another month too. And here's the thing about this list. It gets everything from my head onto a list. So I know that I can consider everything at one point, and it turns my not now but later technique into something that's much more effective, number one. And then number two, I don't ever have to ask myself any question when I'm adding something on to a list. I just have to get it out. That's my only job. When it's time to make a purchase, these are my yes items. Let's say we'll just put a couple more of these in yes. We have some couple more expensive ones. I now have $266 worth of stuff that I'm considering, and I can only afford $200. By having a budget, I'm also setting myself up for success, because a good purchase, a successful purchase, one I'm happy with, is going to be in budget. So that's already clear. And then on top of that, I can now apply my questions to this wish list and to this much smaller category of items, instead of dealing with all of these things that I want and they're all at different stores. I could be building my cart at all of these stores and have $100 here, $25 here, $50 here, another $100 here. Well, it's $300 worth of stuff. And if I'm looking at everything individually, I can miss the fact that I'm over budget. And making these choices one at a time at all of these different stores might be something that you have to do. But if I could think about it once in one place and consider everything that I want to buy together, then it's much easier, and I've streamlined everything to just make it as easy as possible for me to stick with. And what's also really fulfilling that helps me here too is filtering things to things that I didn't buy. So far this year, in reality, $97 worth of stuff that I had at one point on my wish list that I took off. I no longer have to consider these or ask any questions about them because I allowed them to sit for, at some points, just 2 or 3 days, and others were like maybe a week or two. I think one of the ways where we can lack intentionality is when we're too quick to purchase, when we limit the time that we spend considering. If you're somebody who really struggles with impulsivity and buying things as you want them, adding them to a wish list can be a really great way, and then having that weighing out happening in real time. And then number 2, one of the best strategies that has worked for me for years, and I've talked about on the channel a lot, I'll talk about it one more time, is my not now, but later. It's really simple. When you want something, all you say to yourself is not now, later, and then you pick a time to reevaluate. You actually have to reevaluate. The reason why you would say later, like the goal is not to not buy something. The only goal is to reassess. If you're thinking, Shauna, I'm on a no buy, I can't use this rule, I still suggest it, because if you tell your mind or if you tell your brain no, the no feels like forever, and then you might just break your no buy. But if you say, okay, not now, but later, and I'll reevaluate in 5 days, and you actually come back and reevaluate in 5 days, like you actually have that intention, and you're not going into that reevaluation like saying, I'm only telling myself to reevaluate so I can say no. You're only just going into reevaluate. It frees up your brain to be like, okay, it's not never, like we're going to reevaluate and it's going to be soon. So I could potentially have this thing soon. And then you could, you could breathe. And then usually when the day comes and you go to reevaluate, you're usually in a clear state of mind to say, you know what, I recognize that I wanted this thing out of lust or desire or impulsivity. And while I still want it, I don't need it now. So setting a budget, creating an order of operations, and creating time are 3 of my best strategies to become a better shopper who feels more comfortable with their purchases. The reason why I find my intentional purchasing tracker so important and so effective is because it allows me to prioritize. Now, there are additional questions we could ask ourselves before we make our purchase or during the purchasing decision altogether. If you're somebody who's really trying to establish criteria, it's not second nature in your mind yet to ask yourself questions when you shop, and you're not sure what your purchasing criteria could be, here's some things to think about. In an ideal world, what would making a good purchase look like to me? What steps or factors would I need to consider in order for something to be considered good? We talked about at the top of the video what makes a good purchase and what makes a bad purchase for you at the moment. So this is kind of asking, how do we do more of the good? And you can also ask yourself, what do I value when it comes to new things? So example, cost, aesthetic, brand, sustainability. And this is aligning our purchases with our values. If what is important to you right now is cost, and buying things that are expensive just aren't things that are in the books for you, or also things that satisfy you. For me at the moment, that's skincare. I've used a lot of expensive skincare in the past, and I just have never really found it to be worth the money. And I've still bought expensive skincare every now and then, but I usually regret that choice. And so buying inexpensive skincare first and then gradually increasing the price if I'm not finding something that works is what feels like a good purchase to me. So when I automatically right off the bat want expensive skincare, I recognize that that's kind of like a fantasy self thing and not reflective of reality. And while I want that thing right now, I won't feel like it's a good purchase in the long run. You also broke down some bad purchases at the top of the video. And I spoke about a few reasons why you feel like something was a bad purchase. So in this question, when we're developing our answers, we can also think about the negative purchases. So if you feel like your main reason why you are not happy with how you shop is because you don't use items, what questions can I build into my shopping criteria to help me avoid that thing? For me, it's usually asking myself, do I see myself using this thing to completion? If it's a consumable type of item, do I see myself wearing this thing 50 times or 100 times? And how long would it take me to get there? And then am I willing to own this thing for that long? If your main concern is impulse spending, maybe we can focus on how do I lengthen the consideration stage? How do I lengthen the time between when I'm interested in the item and when I make my purchase? While you're making your purchase, if you really want to make sure you're flagging the time, you can ask yourself, how long did I wait? Instead of did I wait, how long did I wait? Because that means that you're expecting that you waited. And then as well, when you're considering an item, you can ask, how, if at all, would this item impact my life in 2 years? What I found is that a lot of items will not impact my life in 2 years, so they probably wouldn't be a good purchase. But with a lot of items, that one works, but not necessarily with all items. When it comes to elements of my personal style, buying clothing that fits with my personal style is of utmost importance. So I would add that to, like, what do I value when it comes to new things? That it fits my personal style. So by creating time and creating a wish list, it is giving you a place and a mechanism to stop so you can ask yourself these questions. And if you want to write your questions down at the place in which your wish list is at, that is a great idea too. If you're really struggling with waiting, then that should be your focus when it comes to new purchases, and really getting down to, how can I wait longer? Or how can I wait 5 days? Like, how can I make that a reality for me? How do I make that easier? How do I make waiting easier? For me, how do I make waiting easier is my wish list, being able to play in there and change things up, and I just get a lot of satisfaction with planning my purchase, if you will. If I'm allowed $60 or $100 or $200, I do get satisfaction with, how can I finagle this budget in order to meet my needs? And then I'm able to figure out what are my needs by categorizing my items. And then number 2, not now, and later when I'm feeling absolutely desperate. And then also creating like a minimum waiting period or some kind of gamification to help you with waiting. Right now, I'm allowed to buy things with my like YouTube earnings. And so that comes in at the end of the month. And so I can buy baseline needs as they come up during the month, like a body wash, things like that. But I can't buy anything that would be in anything other than a need until I get that paycheck. So it creates a long line of space for me. And then in the meantime, I can add things and take things off of my list and really play with them. I hope this video was helpful in helping you consider what would be a good purchase for you and how to create that criteria for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, hanging out with me today, and I hope to see you again around here soon. Bye.